names on them?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think they are on them. Okay. Eric,
What?
please say here. Guys, I can't hear. Mark.
Hola.
Briar. Billy. Dylan. Michael.
Here.
Star. AJ.
Here.
Edgar.
That's me.
Eli.
Here.
Shirey. Curtis.
Here.
Sabi.
Get my home.
Jesse.
Here.
Xavier. Labs. Okay, some of you are in FFA in here. We had a meeting today and we kicked off our fruit sale. If you were not there and you did not get your packet, you need to get it from me. I do not allow sunflower seeds in my classroom. So you need to get rid of them right now. You can look at a packet, but let's do it at the end, okay? Okay.
That's a good question.
No,
Oh,
this
okay.
is for a different
You
class.
don't have to.
I was gonna be like,
That's fine. I'll show you the packet here at the end.
that's so tough.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah, everyone, you need to give your full attention. Earbuds should be out, phones away. If I see one, it's straight to the office. Put your headphones all the way away. You don't need to have them on your shoulders and your ears. Just put it away. Okay, guys.
Oh yeah. She shut up too.
Okay, we're not gonna do this arguing. We're gonna pay attention.
Sorry. Alright, can you pull up my PowerPoint?
Yes, sorry.
How's it going today, guys? You surviving your Thursday?
Yeah.
Ready for it to be over?
Yeah.
Tired?
Yeah.
Alright, well, let's try getting through this. So, what county are we in?
Jackson.
Jefferson.
It's Jackson. Jackson.
Jackson or Jefferson?
Jackson.
Which one is it?
It's
Jackson.
Alright, Jackson. Sounds good.
Jefferson's over there.
So, Jackson is right here, right?
Yup.
Now, let's think about rain. We've been getting plenty of it, haven't we?
Yeah.
Now, whenever you look at this map, where do you think the driest part of the state is?
West.
Northwest or southwest?
South.
South?
South.
Some people think it's north. Everyone's saying southwest? Okay. Now, how do you think it is in the middle?
Decent.
Decent? You think it's more wet over here?
Yeah.
Alright. Now, let's take a look. I don't know. There we go. So, here we have our map. You guys did a good job. We got our driest spots down here, around 13 to 18 inches, and then it just gradually gets more wet until we get down to the
They're like flooded down there, aren't they?
east part. Well, yeah. So if you think about the Missouri River, kind of runs right along here, and if you got Iowa, and then Nebraska and South Dakota. Have any of you guys heard about what has happened this year in South Dakota and Nebraska?
We did.
Yeah, it's flooded real bad.
Half of Nebraska was covered in ice, the other half was
Right. So all of that water has came down along this line, and there's places that are still underwater that will not get to be relieved really because they have to keep water flowing.
Attention please, the students that were out on the field trip have returned and they should be back in class.
That water has to keep flowing that way when stuff starts to freeze during the winter, that it's able to keep water moving and then you don't have flooding in the winter because that would be really bad. So now what do we do in these areas predominantly over here where it's really dry and sometimes through the middle? What do we do to supplement this rainfall?
water irrigation.
Irrigation? Alright, what kind of irrigation systems?
Like those massive like things in fields.
Big pivots, big pivots. Right. Have you guys ever seen the fields out west that look like this? That's absolutely terrible drawing, but you get my point. So if you fly over on an airplane, you'll see how the fields are laid out in squares, but you'll see a circle because there's the irrigation pivot that stays in the middle and makes it all the way around. That way all the crops get water.
That's even worse than the first one.
Yeah, I know. I'm not very good with that. But moral of the story is, we're there. You can do that in those flat areas, but it's not too flat here, is it? So, now let's think about water. Water, does it kind of seem boring, or is it something that's interesting? Name all some things we can use with water. Swimming.
Drinking.
Cooking. Drinking.
Fishing.
What about bathing? Sure, you football boys need a bath.
Oh, yeah.
Alright, so there's a lot more to it than just water, because I think it's something that we can kind of take advantage of, especially here in this area where we do have so much waterfall. So now we're going to move on and talk about some of the characteristics of water, and I have a note paper. I have a note paper for you guys to fill out.
Starting to, cover something stupid.
Water wet.
I honestly don't know.
If you look at the site, it's not wet, but it does make things wet. You're not cheating.
You can have this one, this. You don't know shit.
Alright, everyone that needs one got one. I put one on your desk.
That's why you're like
Alright, let's start going through this.
17 or 16.
So, how much of Earth's surface is covered in water? 75?
80%.
2.
75. Go ahead and fill that in on your sheets.
What did I say? I remember seeing
Okay, now, what does water, what two types of gases?
Hydrogen, oxygen.
Hydrogen, oxygen? Alright, this is going well. Going on. So then what are the molecules?
H2O.
2 moles of hydrogen, 1 mole of oxygen. Seems like you guys are all pretty well up to speed on this. You guys good over here on this? Not yet? Okay. So you got your 2 H's. H2O. So that means you have 1 oxygen that is formed to 2 hydrogen. And that is your water molecule that does all of these different things and has all these different types of properties.
Most of them probably not know what
Okay.
moles is.
So basically, there's all these little particles, all these little atoms, right? The basis of all things, but they have all these different properties, and there's all these elements, like on the periodic table. Now, hydrogen and oxygen are both on the periodic table, and they form these compounds to make up these different substances. So, here's the idea that water is bipolar. Now, the way that the electrons are, so your atoms have electrons, protons, and neutrons. The electrons determine its charge. But, if you ever take 2 magnets, which I forgot to bring magnets, so you guys ever taken 2 magnets and try to get them to stick together, and they don't go together? That's because the charges are repelling each other. So now water has this characteristic, which kind of causes us to have all these different unique characteristics. You guys get that wrote down? Alright, what 3 forms of water exist in?
Solid, liquid, gas.
Perfect. Now, and we'll go ahead and talk about the temperatures of those solid. It becomes a solid at what temperature?
32 degrees.
Below 32. Alright. And it is liquid from? Perfect.
It starts to melt at 32.
Right. I just kind of shot the gap there. Alright, now, and then it turns into gas vapor above. And what is water doing whenever it's boiling, right?
Yeah, I didn't know if
Yep.
when I stopped.
Yeah, go ahead. It is boiling at that point. So, now, of all the naturally occurring substances in the world, what do you think, which one do you think has the highest boiling point? One with talking about water. Alright. And then, so, what is a solvent? What can you use a solvent for? To dissolve stuff. Awesome. Now, think about how water dissolves stuff. What does water do to metal? Rusts it, right? And what does water do to sugar? Dissolves it. But the crazy thing is that water can dissolve almost anything, but still yet we can shower, we can drink it, throw water balloons at each other, swim, whatever. So that's just a very interesting point to think about when it comes to water, how it interacts in our bodies, and like mainly the rest of all living things, like plants and animals. So if you think back to our big map with all the rainfall, or if you think about it on a global scale, what does water determine in those certain areas? What does water, the amount of rainfall determine? What does it allow you to do? Sure. What about the types of crops? How much rain does a cactus need versus an oak tree? A lot less, right? So that's good. Something to think about. So I have the definition here. With any temperature zone, the availability of water is the most important factor in determining which plants will grow and how productive they will be. So all just from these raindrops that come from the sky, or the water that is below, will just determine what they will be able to do. A point I forgot to talk about earlier. So everyone knows, do you guys know what alfalfa is?
Yeah.
You know how much a ton of alfalfa is? How much is a ton?
2,000 pounds.
So what happens if you take all that water out of that 2,000 pounds? How much alfalfa do you think will be left? Take a guess.
100 pounds.
100 pounds?
No, probably less than that.
Couple hundred pounds?
1,200.
Alright, so it's a little more than that. If you took all the water out of that 2,000 pounds, you would have 520 pounds of alfalfa left. Which is kind of crazy to think about, right?
1,500 pounds.
It's nuts. So, who can tell me what the water cycle is? You got an idea?
Yeah, it's if we're able to rain, it needs to get humid out.
Evaporation.
Yeah, and that
Sure.
it goes up in there and it causes it to go back.
Alright.
It's a model of
Precipitation. We'll take a look at our diagram here. So, this describes the continuous movement of water on, above, and below the surface. You guys can write down, if you can have a little area on your paper, you can kind of draw this out. So, like we talked about, it evaporates from the ocean, lakes, and streams. And whenever it evaporates, then what does it become?
Clouds.
Condensation. What happens with condensation?
Rain.
It's
Precipitation.
precipitation. And then that
Surface
brings us
runoff.
down there to having,
Groundwater.
and then just like that. And something we're gonna dig into more is transpiration from plants. So let me know whenever you guys got everything done. You need for, what do you think? I don't know. How about I draw it for you?
Blessings here.
I know you guys love my drawings. Okay, so we have our clouds. That's a beautiful cloud.
Those are great clouds.
And in our clouds, we have condensation. So what is this coming from the clouds? Is it precipitation or precipitation?
We know what you're talking about, so
Yeah,
you
it's all
spell
the
it
same.
right.
I'm terrible.
It's alright.
It's alright.
I feel you there.
Alright, now on the ground,
Surface runoff.
we have water on the ground, which is groundwater. If the water flows somewhere, then we have surface runoff. I'll step out of your way. So, I'll let you get caught up.
The thing we need is the irrigation system.
Right, I'll get to that. That's coming. So what happens whenever the water goes back up?
Evaporation.
Evaporation. Are you missing part of your worksheet?
No, it's not part of it.
Okay. Sorry. You good now?
Yeah, I'm good.
Alright, is everyone good on the water cycle?
Yeah.
Good. Okay. Let's move on to how water moves through plants. And sorry, these are not quite copied the way I want them to do. What?
Yeah, it's supposed to.
No. That's it. Alright, so if you flip it over on the side that has the little plant on it.
They both have little plants.
Oh, sorry. That one. The one that's on the screen. Grab 2 color pencils.
Green, brown.
Alright, you guys each grab 2 color pencils. Those work perfectly. So, what kind of previous science classes have you guys taken?
Physical science.
Chemistry,
biology.
biology,
Biology, I think.
Okay.
I failed chemistry.
space science. I took that. This is my 4th time in space science.
59%.
Yeah. 2 color pencils.
Me and him both failed chemistry. So we were smart enough to get in it, but not smart enough to
AJ, how'd you
pass.
fail chemistry?
I don't know, Michael. How can you not read?
Okay.
Okay.
Alright guys, let's bring it back good. Hand those back to him whenever you're done. So, now we're going to be talking about how water moves through plants. The key words that we'll first start with is the phloem. So, take whatever color pencil you're going to use for your phloem and highlight that word. Phloem, yep. Highlight phloem with whatever color pencil you're going to use. Yeah. The phloem is the tube on the right.
You want us to like follow the tube?
Yep. So then you'll take your colored pencil and color in the tube of the phloem. Alright, now let's talk about what's happening in that tube. What the phloem is doing is it's taking the food that is made by the leaf and is carrying it up and down to the rest of the plant. So it kind of acts as a mediator in between whatever direction it needs to go to make sure that the plant is getting the proper food nutrients that it needs. Alright, is everyone pretty well done with that? Good? Cool. Let's go to the xylem. Now the xylem just goes up, and it's taking all your water and minerals that it needs from the soil and taking it up to the rest of the plant. So go ahead and highlight the word xylem and color in your tube.
You're supposed to get the call rate.
Yep.
Why would you let him do that?
That's okay. I should have been more clear on that. I'm sorry, that's my bad.
You were clear on that. Just never listened. That's my bad.
Did I say it?
Yeah.
Okay. I didn't know if I did or not. Alright, so now the xylem takes the water back up to the leaves. Then what happens is we go back to this word of transpiration. That takes us to our next graph. So if someone wants to tell me,
I know this
what is this top box right here? Stuff coming down from the sky.
is precipitation.
Precipitation.
So there we go. That's our first step in the transpiration cycle. If you guys go ahead and fill that in, that is on the back side of your sheet. I'll let everyone get that turned over before I go any further.
This is precipitation.
Yep.
Oh, yeah. Well, geez. Yeah, let's hear this.
Alright, everyone got the paper flipped over?
Oh, I got that. Entire side done.
Alright, so now, this coming from the leaves is our transpiration. Have you guys ever looked at a cornfield in the summer? And you know how cornfields are pretty, or the leaves are pretty wide on the stalks, right? Will you ever see them roll up whenever it gets hot and dry out? Now what that corn plant is trying to do is avoid that transpiration. That plant's running low on water, so it's coiling itself up to stay out of the sun, therefore not drying out and dying. Now if we go to the ground, with the water that's left on the ground, we have evaporation. Now do you think evaporation, whenever we're watering our crops, is something we want to avoid? Do you think there's ways that we can water a crop and avoid evaporation? Alright, we will get to that later on.
Have a lesson.
Irrigation.
So, we're going to mix things up a little bit now. So I'm going to grab my supplies. So, we filled out the chart on how water moves through plants, right? Now what happens? Perfect. So we talked about water moving up through the plants. Now, do you think there's a way we can test this?
Yeah.
How do you think we can test it? Test what? How do you think we can find out if this water really is moving up through the plants?
Colors.
cut the bottom of the stem.
And then
put
what?
water-
Put
see
it
if
in
water
the
comes
water
out.
and cut it.
No, you can do
Yeah.
the top.
With
See if
certain
water
flowers.
goes to the top.
With certain
Cut it
flowers, you
from
can
the
make them
top.
change colors.
You make them change colors. How can you make them change colors?
There's
I was
Some
just
dye.
thinking of like.
Dye the water.
I've seen people do it with highlighters, make it glow a little bit.
Put dye in it. Well,
Yeah.
that is what we're
Food
gonna do
coloring.
today. So I have,
I want to see.
Cheater.
I think about a dozen flowers, but if I could get someone who wanted to use celery too, just so we can kind of see the difference. So whenever I have you guys come up here,
I'll call first.
you can basically
I want to see the bottom.
cut it to where you still have plenty of stem, but that way it'll stay in the cup and not knock the cup over. Is the main goal here. Is to have the right length. So if you cut it to about, Miss Clark, would you say we'd be good about right here? So if you cut about that much off, and then after that, so I come up, I'll call you up by tables, and then grab a piece of celery or a flower, cut it, go fill it up with water, and then I'll give you the next steps after that. So you guys want to go first?
So small things.
That works.
You can just leave that up here. I'll throw it away for you. All right, you can do that too. All right. Hold on, now. You guys want to call up next?
Like right here?
You can probably go a little lower.
Here?
Yep, that looks good.
Watch it. Here on the table.
You guys. Yeah, I agree.
Bro, come on. I wish I was on second. But I was on second.
Sure, Jason.
Nice catch.
I used to bench so fast.
Alright, you two boys come up.
I'd have to go this way.
When we get one each,
Yeah,
I'll do some.
cool.
Where should I cut that?
Probably about like right here. Yeah. Yep, and then go put water in there. Like right here.
You think I should have cut it a little shorter?
Well, what happened? Yeah, you should be alright. There's
Just the first person that looks on
Yeah. Someone started staring. Swinging
you about looking over.
you come up, bud.
Slam their head on the door. Throw their hands.
Alright, you guys suck a silly.
Throw their
I wanna
hands.
find you the best piece of silly.
That would hurt. Which Sonic would hurt?
The one on the feet of God.
Oh yeah, you know that.
Use
How do
that.
you work with that one?
See what
That one
happens.
on both hairs.
If you want a piece to eat, you can have a piece to eat.
Because I know people that work there. I watched them interview people. I saw a girl in a onesie, uniform onesie there. I went to visit my girlfriend and a girl in a onesie popped up. It's funny as hell. You got yellow?
Yes. That's green. But you're supposed to use. You can have the first pick.
I'll take pink.
It's because she's the only
You're
girl
supposed to
in the
use a darker color too, because it goes through there better.
There is no problem.
But if you guys want to try, as long as they have like a few people that or the
I'm on
majority
blue.
of people use the dark
Yeah, I'm
color,
on board too.
then
I'm gonna get
good
pink.
to go with the rest of it.
I've seen
I
people do
call
it with
it
highlights, and then they turn the black light on. Let me get
Really?
Yeah.
Is there dark blue? Yeah, blue.
Alright. So after you get done, just turn it around and pass it to the person next to you. If you want to wait on a color too, that's fine. But go ahead and put a pretty good dose of food coloring in there.
Oh my god, my god.
Don't use the whole thing.
Don't use the whole thing, because everyone's got to get some.
That was a nasty.
I passed it up.
Oh, bad.
It'll come
AJ,
back.
can I get that after? Yeah.
You pretty good there.
Don't use all of it.
How much do you need? Just oh, this is red. Anybody else want to use purple? Just a drop?
He's got some purple and green over here. That green looks pretty dark.
Look how much I used.
Yeah, you just dump it in there.
I didn't dump it in there. I swear.
I'll fucking spray it.
Look at this though. Oh.
If this works, I will shit.
Okay, so before we move along, what are our predictions?
Obviously, it's in purple.
Think it's gonna work out well?
I know mine's gonna work out well.
What about the people with celery? Or two
I mean,
volunteers? Think it's gonna change a little bit?
he uses that.
Green on.
I just decided.
Well, as long as there's something in there, we'll see what happens. You know what? We got 2 extra cups. Let's do 2 more celeries.
You want me to fill up the thing of celery? There's no more.
Yeah, there's no more flowers, but we got 2 more. If you want to go fill these
Go
up
ahead and
for
pout.
me.
Yeah. Yeah, you're gonna pout.
Thanks, bud.
Let me fill it
Let's
up.
try purple for sure on one, and then we can try doing pink on the other.
Yes.
Yep, that's fine. Just have him grab the cups whenever he's done. So, we all think it's gonna work. Hopefully it does. I'll have us at the end of the class go ahead and put it up top. That way, whenever you got, what day you guys back in here?
Monday.
Tuesday? Monday or Tuesday?
I won't be here Monday.
Wait,
So-
are you guys gonna be back Monday?
I will not be. But maybe you guys can come back even if you got second pass through tomorrow or Monday, just to see if you got anything going on. What do you think is gonna have a better reaction, the flour or the celery?
I think flower.
Flour.
Flour.
But I wanted to try this.
I've seen some, like whenever I was doing research on this experiment, it's kind of crazy how much the celery changes. But hopefully those flours change a lot. We'll see. So now we know how water gets through the plants, what the water does in the plants.
I want to see the same change.
We'll get back to talking about irrigation because I know you guys want to get that filled out on your sheets. So if Miss Clark can pull up my first video. So on the back sides of your sheet, you have a 1, 2, 3, and 4 on there. We're going to talk about the 4 main different types of irrigation systems. Has everyone got this wrote down?
You
Good.
want me to play the video or wait?
Hold on just a second. Who knows about the Egyptians? What were they known for?
Cool coffee here.
Cool coffins, pyramids,
Everyone knows
irrigation. How did their irrigation systems work? Plug canals, right? So, out west, I have some friends out there that ranch and farm out west, and they still pretty well use kind of the same system as the Egyptians did. So the Egyptians had the big Nile River, right? And basically, you channel off water, and then you'd have your crops, and then you'd run channels of water in between your crops. And like we'll be able to see that in this should be in this video here. Yeah, go ahead and play this video.
Watering.
Yeah. So instead of having a big canal that runs down through there, they have it piped. So like say if this area is really flat or not close to the water, they're running it through this pipe and doing it furrow, which means in between the rows, to send that water all the way down there. Now what do you think some problems are with this irrigation system? Evaporation,
Overwatering.
overwatering, what'd you say?
Weather.
What about runoff? So you think you could have some erosion issues with this?
Yeah.
Good. But is this probably a pretty nice way to go about it on a large scale operation? Whenever you gotta get that much water out there?
Maybe you'd have to make sure it's at like a downhill slope or just,
Huddle up right there.
I don't know, not get evenly throughout the whole field.
Sure. A lot of things to think about with this one.
I didn't
Plus-
know they seem to still do that.
Yeah, my friends at farm out in we can pause this video.
That's kind of loud.
My friends that farm out in Colorado, they have their canals that run through. They got their pipe and they get suction in their pipe and they roll it over and send it out.
Really
Corn and soybeans. Yep. And
It's like farming.
alright, so what you guys, if you guys read the instructions on your paper, what you all need to have wrote down?
Irrigation system names.
Right. So our first name was what? Surface irrigation. When's a good time to apply this type of irrigation?
Flat, usually dry.
Flat, dry areas. What else? What else do you need for this?
Water.
What kind of water?
Lots.
Like what kind of body of water? We're talking aquifer, a pond, a lake, or some rivers?
Don't they all work?
Probably gonna go
No,
more
river?
towards a river. Yep. Now we'll get to aquifer on the next one.
Yeah, that's those big like rotating.
Yeah, that's what they draw from. So, and then write down some of those problems we talked about. You guys want to run through some of those problems we had with the surface irrigation?
Erosion.
Erosion, right? Okay, guys. So now we're going to move on to our next type of irrigation. This is the irrigation that you guys will be most applicable to you guys.
It's gonna be a good ad.
This one, right?
Yes.
I think
should-
we're getting it.
Yes, this one. You can skip it.
Bold research. Bold research.
Georgia farmers depend on the ability to irrigate their crops, and with modern irrigation systems, crops get watered in a timely manner, and natural resources are conserved.
Yeah, the mother of Mark Wildman visited one at Village Georgia Farm where high-tech irrigation saves time and money.
During the hot, dry Georgia summers, farmers depend heavily on their center pivot irrigation systems. Running these systems are very expensive, and they need to operate as efficiently as possible. Here on one of Sodmaster's GA's fields in Montrose, Georgia, our manager Glenn Solomon uses a system from Rinky Manufacturing.
Irrigation is probably the only saving grace we have in the farm community now. Without irrigation, it's just really tough to grow a quality product, especially when you start talking turf grass. Turf grass just really can't be grown unless you can irrigate.
Modern irrigation systems use computer technology so the farmer can customize irrigation, which saves the farm time and money.
Most of these pivots that I've done on the farm, I can turn them on remotely from my cell phone now. I can change the direction, stop them at any time. I think one of the favorite things is the guys, when they're out spraying or working, they call me and tell me to move the pivot a little bit, so they don't have to get out of the tractor that's air conditioned.
Glenn works close with his local dealer, Jay Brown, to make sure he has the right system and it is operating at peak efficiency.
We really push the technology side for farmers like Mr. Glenn and all here that can really take this to their advantage and allows them to focus more on other things that need to be done around the farm and get more done in the same amount of effort. And we really like the technology there. There's a lot of simple aspects of it that can save you time and keep you from having to go do a lot of struggling and all.
Mike Mills is the Southeast Territory Manager for Rinke Manufacturing, and he works close with dealers to help educate them on new technologies that are changing all the time.
It is amazing to see what's happened just in the last decade, where we've gone from manual switches and push buttons to touchscreen computerized control panels, GPS guidance on components, as well as remote control and remote monitoring operations. We can now monitor temperature, soil moisture, leaf wetness, humidity, report that directly to the grower on any one of a number of mobile devices, and then allow that grower to make real-time changes to their irrigation scheduling and operation without ever having to come out to the field. And that has just been a tremendous boost for the efficacy of the farmer, the yield boost, as well as the being a better steward of the water and the natural resources.
If a farm has an irrigation system in place, it can be fitted with new technologies. This pivot at Sodmasters is a good example of that. But the real challenge for irrigation professionals is communication with the farmers.
You know, it's a slow process, but don't lose sight of the fact that it's here. So it may not be something that every grower is comfortable with today. Everybody has to find their own comfort level, but prepare for it because it is coming. And so if it's not you, if it's your next generation, at least prepare yourself when you're making your equipment and product selections.
So as the summer heats up in middle Georgia, farms like this one in Montrose can utilize high-tech tools to not only save time, but money as well. I'm Mark Wildman for the Georgia Farm Monitor.
So, what was the name of this irrigation system?
Business system? Center pivot.
And this is all goes to our sprinkler system. So, when I label it as a sprinkler system, I do that because what do fancy neighborhoods have in their yards? Sprinklers. And golf courses.
This is an example of two large-scale irrigation
like
systems
that.
located at the UF IFAS
okay.
plant.
Now, what are some applications for the sprinkler systems like we just talked about? Our fields, our yards, golf courses, things like that. Now, what are some problems we can run into with these? Pipes breaking. Sprinklers not shutting off.
Well, those tires that spin around, would those affect the crop?
A little bit, yes. But also, what do
I've
tires
always
do?
wondered.
Tires go flat, right?
Yeah.
See, that's like with those pivot systems that I drew, remember my big pretty circle? Those crops are planted for it to work around.
Really?
Uh-huh.
I always wondered that.
Yeah.
Have you ever flown up here?
No.
Sometimes if you're look down, like if you're going from like western Kansas and you can see like
Well, yeah, I've
fields
seen
all
that.
around instead of like, no, at least.
I've seen pictures.
Yeah.
And you can tell from the
There's definitely, you go to Ross,
Yeah,
if you go to Rossville, you can see a couple of them out there.
Rossville. Okay, so the main idea of the sprinkler systems, what does it look like? What does it kind of act like? Actual
Rain.
Sure. But we talked about those problems, and another problem that we have to worry about, Miss Clark, help me. I don't want to screw up the pronunciation of the aquifer in Western Kansas.
The Ogallala Aquifer.
Ogallala. Now, that is an aquifer that once scientists said we could not drain. Guess what? Levels are getting pretty low. That contributes to a lot of things. I'm not just blaming it on agriculture, but it is something to think about when we talked about crops, growing crops. That is all dependent on water. So, what if in those areas we used a crop that took less water? Or what is something else we can do with crops now in technology? What are our new types of seeds that we plant.
Genetic engineering kind of.
Genetically modified organisms, which are GMOs. Now, there's GMOs that are drought resistant. So basically what they've done with those plants is bred them to ask them, for those plants to ask for less water. So basically, what if you could take a corn plant and make it more like a cactus? That would be cool, right? So then you can cut down on the amount of water you need, therefore saving one of our resources. So does everyone have the stuff they need filled out for a sprinkler? You got where to use it, big crop fields, or golf courses and yards, and some of the problems with it. So remember some of the concerns we had for moving all this type of water? What were some of those concerns?
Broken pipes.
Broken pipes. What about the actual water itself?
Evaporation.
Maybe not, no, it's more of that than that. Evaporation. What was
Too much water.
the water run on the ground? Too much water, so then we have runoff. What does
Erosion.
runoff cause? Erosion. So, this, what you're only really going to put this on a smaller scale, and this is kind of what Miss Clark has set up in the greenhouse. But, so you go ahead and write down, this is your drip or trickle irrigation system. So Miss Clark, if you want to go ahead and play the video.
And I just let it flush the system. That way if there's any dirt or anything in there, it'll just flush the system completely out. So that's why I have an input on that. Okay. Now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to turn it on. I'm going to show you these emitters operating. Okay, so now I'm over here at my ball valve. And what I'll do is I'll just turn this on a little bit so you can see it. Okay, now here's the beauty of having that valve in here, is that I can adjust how much pressure that I want coming out to each plant. When I crank it up, right there, I'm running about 2 gallons per hour right there, or about. Now these are little seedlings, and I don't want 2 gallons per hour running there because they're really small. So I have the ability with this valve is to crank this down like that, and just let them kind of drip out like that. Okay, and you'll notice this one here is working fine too. And I'm just going to go ahead and put, the rest of these in along here, but I typically don't do it this way. And there's some people that like it that way, but as the root systems, as these plants get bigger, the root systems will get pretty big. So as long as they're in the proximity of the root, you're going to be just fine. Okay, so I know a lot of people ask, well, why would I want to use a drip system? Well, for one reason, the biggest reason, is you want to target just the plant. You want to water just the plant. And the second thing is that you're not watering weeds. If you were to just spray this bed with water and saturate it, you're going to be helping the weeds grow and everything else that's in there. And thirdly is you're preserving water, which is a really good thing. And also when you spray water back and forth, you're not only just spraying the whole bed, you're watering the wood and you're watering the ground outside, and so yeah, this is the way to go. So I would love to hear any comments you might have. I'd love to see your systems, post videos, give me links and whatnot, and I'd love to see how you guys have yours. So, all right, well, there is the way I do it, and I'm not necessarily saying it's the right way or the most efficient way, but it's the way I've been doing it. So, okay, and one thing I need to add is that you want to make sure that if you live in an area where you get freezing temperatures at night, you want to make
So, yeah, that video kind of average, but that was the best one I could find on that. What do these drip tickle irrigation systems allow?
Not tickle.
I always mess that up.
Target's just the plants.
Just the
saves
plants.
water.
Awesome.
No weeds. Water's around.
That's a great point. No weeds, because you're just gonna have it on that, so you're not gonna have all that water in between for those weeds to have. That's a really good point. So it's a good way to save on some water, keep water away from plants that we don't like. Now, there's one more that we're going to talk about. This is Spark pulled for last video. This one's really interesting to me. Probably not the most applicable, but still one that the book talks about. And one I think you guys will find interesting as well. If you want to go ahead and start the video.
Grass is all too familiar with overhead sprinklers. Anyone who's ever had grass is all too familiar with overhead sprinklers and the headache they can create. But times have changed, and so has water technology. Today, the most efficient way to water a lawn is below the surface. When temperatures soar, homeowners ramp up their water use to keep valley landscapes looking their best. In the warmest months, residents use up to 90% of their water outside. While lawns do require a lot more water than a drought-tolerant landscape, sprinklers often water turf more than is needed. Overwatering is not only wasteful, it can create bigger problems. For instance, drowning your turf in water can leach fertilizer and natural soil nutrients from the root zone and cause grass to die. On the contrary, subsurface irrigation can improve the health of your lawn by preventing problems often seen with above-ground sprinkler systems. It can trim your water bill and, more importantly, conserve water. Subsurface irrigation is a highly efficient watering technique that can decrease outdoor water consumption by as much as 40%. It's similar to drip irrigation, the preferred method for watering desert-friendly plants in southern Nevada.
Subsurface irrigation is very similar to drip irrigation. It has point source emitters on it, so it actually has the emitters built into the pipe.
Any student that has
similar to drip
not
irrigation where it's
taken
putting water
a
at
photo
specific
yet,
points.
that was not here,
The difference is
absent
between it
on
and drip
picture
irrigation
day,
is that
or
actually
if
it is
you
built into the pipe.
wanted
The
to
drip
take
actually has like
a
stuff
retake done,
coming
you
off
need
of
to
it.
report to the
It's more
library.
efficient than spray
at this
irrigation because it's actually putting water down into the soil. So you're not losing water to evaporation or wind and things like that.
A buried drip system has many advantages compared to sprinkler irrigation and can provide long-term benefits to your lawn. One of the pluses is that subsurface irrigation eliminates evaporation.
When you use spray irrigation, you're putting water up into the air, so you're misting. With the winds, it's blowing, it's evaporating, it's going all over the place. With subsurface, it's again putting it below the grass, and so you don't have evaporation occurring, so it's reducing it significantly by going through that process.
Because your lawn is irrigated beneath the surface, you'll avoid overspray and runoff, common problems homeowners face with a traditional overhead spray system. Subsurface irrigation also will protect hardscapes, such as patios and sidewalks, from water damage. Another benefit? Less maintenance.
In a very general sense, subsurface irrigation is much more maintenance-free compared to overhead sprinklers. With overhead sprinklers, you're always having to check for broken heads, misaligned heads. Sometimes you have to check for the PVC pipe below because that can crack. With subsurface, you don't have to deal with those issues. However, with subsurface, you do have to check for clogged heads down below. Actually, sometimes roots can get into it, so you need to check to make sure the filter system is actually putting in the right chemicals that maybe will prevent that.
Even though you'll have less yard work, you'll still need to monitor your water use. If you're not careful, you could overwater and even underwater your turf. After your new irrigation system is in the ground, turn on your system and observe it watering the soil before you lay sod.
One of the things you need to check on periodically is how much water is actually going to your lawn. Obviously, the quick check is just to visually look at it, see how the lawn's doing. Obviously, if it's drying out, you're not putting enough water in the ground. If it's basically when you're walking out, it's like a marsh or something, you're probably putting too much water. But really, to find out how much is the appropriate amount, you really look at it before you even put the grass down. And you run the system several times and just make sure there's good coverage across the ground. And that's really the best way to make sure that you're actually delivering the right amount of water to the ground.
Subsurface irrigation works best in a new lawn. But
So the
before
name
you
of this
start
one
digging,
is
consider consulting a WaterSmart contractor
Subsurface
who has
irrigation. Go ahead and write
experience
that down.
installing state-of-the-art technology. If you choose
So let's
to
talk
install
about it.
yourself,
What'd you guys learn?
remove hard compacted soil first and replace it with good quality soil.
Sorry, I
A
can't.
uniform soil texture will prevent dry spots seen in
Yes.
dirt.
See that?
Also, take measurements of the area.
No, I do not. Why is it better? What makes it
Because
better?
no evaporation.
What you got?
It's for one, it saves money, and then you're saying it saves parts, because you always have to check to make sure that the damage to the head doesn't grow.
So sticking it underground, you don't have to worry about running over with the lawnmower.
Through
Good.
the water.
Kind of. What's this probably the most similar to?
Drip. 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 Trickle.
Drip, trickle, trickle, not tickle. Okay. But is it really applicable to anything besides yards?
No.
Not so much.
Not even big yards either, probably. Just small yards like that.
True.
That 30 by 30.
Very true. What is also the problem with putting it in there?
Probably expensive.
You can't tell when something goes wrong until it dries up. So.
Great points. And then, if unless I live down in Manhattan, right? They're building a bunch of new houses there, and whenever they're building it, obviously they've done all the land work for the houses, so there's like no grass on these lots, so everything that comes in gets resodded. So that'll be fine. But if you already have your grass yard there, that doesn't seem like very much fun, does it? It kind of seems expensive. Okay, so let's run through this to make sure you guys have everything you need on your notes. First system we talked about was
Surface.
surface. What do we need to know about surface? Do what?
Erosion. Instead of erosion.
Erosion. That's one of the negatives. What's another negative?
Runoff.
Okay, so what's some of the positives? It's a good big field application, right? Cool. And then what do you need to have to make this really work?
River.
Awesome. So everyone got that wrote down?
Yep.
Cool. Let's move on to number 2. What was the second one we talked about?
Sprinkler.
Sprinkler,
Well, the specific
or
one is
more
center pivot.
so in our field is center pivot. Pros and cons?
Too much water use.
A lot of water to run these.
Evaporation.
Evaporation. What's some of the pros? Just for watering time. Easy. It makes sense, right? We're making rain. Call it the rainmaker. The rainmaker.
I like that one.
But while we have these problems with irrigation, if you think about it, we're still at, hey guys, we're still at a deficit in terms of food. So it's important that we still have these kind of operations, these sprinkling irrigation systems, but we just gotta be smart how we use them.
Secondary tips.
So the third one we talked about, drip and tickle, or drip and trickle.
Drip tickle again.
Huh? Come on. When do we use this application? Perfect. What do you got? Maybe not so much on golf courses, more like our greenhouses. Our one for our golf courses goes with our sprinklers. There you go.
Is this the one like you were talking about?
Yeah.
The desert plants?
Perfect. Target the plant, and then I don't remember who made the great point that you're keeping water away from the weeds. That was good. Nice work. Nice work. That's what I like. We're learning. We're thinking. And then the last one was subsurface. Now let's just run through that one real quick.
Efficient. Better than regular.
Efficient.
Saves money. Don't have to check on it.
Perfect. But problem is good, 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 good. Alright. So as a little wrap up, if Miss Clark wants to start, actually everyone got their device? RA device,
They can't use their phones, they have to.
you have to use your Chromebook.
No, she's fast. No.
Alright.
That would do it quick. Hey, you give come on, Miss Clark.
So I was in high school for 4 years. I'm pretty sure we had a different phone policy every year I was in high school.
Actually, we all just
Alright, guys, you guys have a Chromebook?
No.
It's been the same for the last
What
few
bad?
You got yours, pull yours out. Go ahead and get yours out.
They just finally started this year.
Really?
We team up, it's almost a lot.
I threw mine down the
If
stairs.
you don't have yours, I'm sure there's plenty of people that don't have. You guys got yours?
You got yours?
You get it out for me, please.
Actually, no, we use it on a touchscreen. Okay,
Yeah, put them up there. You put your names on them.
Yeah, Nick's paw.
It's like $3.50 for that. A box. It's terrible. Someone stole a pink. We want that order back up. I don't
You
know.
went to Dylan's, huh?
Yes, I did go to Dylan's.
I built that store back then. Mine isn't changing, I did that myself. I
You
stayed
want
at
this?
the top.
Yeah, hang on. Let's get ready. Get out your device and pull up Kahoot.com.
We're doing Kahoot.
We're doing Kahoot right now.
Kahoot.
Alright, I'll put up my own then. We don't know.
Absolutely, if you could.
Nah, you made
Don't cap on it.
May not be able to spell or read or speak, I guess, but still know a lot.
You have 3 things you're supposed to bring to class every day. Your tablet, your pencil, and paper. Those 3 things every day are my requirements from the very first day of school.
Can you repeat that?
Pencil, paper, and your Chromebook.
What's that tablet?
I said, I meant the same. I meant like tablet and paper.
What about Chromebook pencil paper?
What about Chromebook pencil paper? Scissors, rock, paper?
Okay, we're not arguing.
No one knows.
I can't.
Give it to your parents.
It gives me
Who's master? Why is it master?
Don't tell me that.
Yeah, why?
He said I can't get.
Is everyone logged on yet?
Not quite yet.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Everybody remember who Duke is. Who's Cal?
We got 12 players.
Your names and
That would
plays.
be.
What if my name's in it? Mark, you don't get points if you don't use your name.
We got everyone, don't we?
There's like
Wait, we know this one.
Miss Clark?
Yes.
You want to hit start for me? I believe so.
Who's KFC?
Michael, I guess, because it gives him.
Alright, let's see what you guys learned today.
This is 70%.
Obviously.
This is easy. It's actually 68%. How am I 9?
Alright, good.
Sorry. You wanna just do
Yep.
one?
It's 5%.
Who missed it?
You said we would. Oh, wait, I don't know. What was that?
You almost
Dude,
That's bad.
oxygen and methane really
That's all I'm saying. I got my
I actually thought
too.
Right. Yeah, that threw me off. Is it not letting me click?
I'm in 4th place. I just came from
I'm 1 point behind
I
you. Bro.
tried, let me click.
No, for like,
Did
look.
you miss it though? No, I got it.
You're like pinpoint.
Let me click.
AJ.
God, even. Let me.
2 points.
Nice guy.
Don't answer too fast.
No, you don't, Shaggy.
Yeah, I do.
No.
Bro, I already know some more.
You tried, dude. It's false.
Alright. So, what does water act like? What are the water molecules act like?
I swear to God,
Like
I said
magnets that
false.
oppose each other. So that's what the bike, what it means. Like,
I really thought I was getting that wrong. It's like, I just saw first.
Dryer.
Four.
Water.
Oh, I didn't even do this one really. This is case like this outside of the thing. Oh,
Hey, 28 points behind you, Shaggy.
I don't, does it look like I really care?
Yes.
No, I'm
Just
Take it.
help me, bro.
Quick with it, I hear. Is it 2
Yeah, it is.
Master Agrees.
Master Egger. How are you still in full?
that's not my name, but yeah.
I'm 11.
Your name's Poppy?
I'm 1 point behind it.
Oh. Stop. Stop. What's
Third.
Which people use the surface irrigation?
Egyptians. Oh, fire.
KFC's coming up.
I'm still in second. I missed one. Why does it say my streak? I haven't missed one. I'm guessing not good enough. Start's not good enough. Oh, geez.
We're tied. We're tied.
So whenever it says under the surface is just an easy way to remember that.
Under means sub.
Me and Shaggy are tied.
Yeah, dude. How am I not?
And it says I'm in fourth.
I'm going off.
Well, that stinks, doesn't
It
it?
says tied with
You ain't got 5 digits. You're
What the?
You left.
Oh, that is definitely the wrong one. Oh, I did the dread, bro. That is sprinkle. It's sprinkler.
How am I still behind you?
Just click.
Alright guys, so our sprinkler system, what's the other name for it?
Trickle.
No.
Or center pivot.
It's a
Center
work in
pivot.
progress.
And those are the big ones we have in the field.
Can we go again? Can't play again.
No.
Yes. We should
No.
do it again. Start
Can I
with
just
one
shoot
more.
ourselves?
No, we do.
Alright. Oh.
Drip tackle.
Which one is it?
Top to the. I'm surprised you didn't sell it.
I believe so.
Yes, I was in place.
Yeah,
I
it took too
just
long to
second.
answer. I didn't read it.
I just got it. Oh.
Oh, congrats.
This is
Oh, yeah. Let's go. Let's go.
I know, that's not.
You got like 20 minutes.
Alright, hey,
Still in top
you
5.
guys wanna run through it again?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, player goes. Yeah.
Behind us, on the back there.
It's on the back table.
They can only go if you say, I think, get feedback and then it'll come up, right?
Okay.
Anyone.
Bitch, I'm no boy. Who the fuck is
Okay,
me?
make sure you're still playing or you're
It's
gonna
not
lose
one.
points.
I'm not gonna. Are we playing ghost mode?
Ghost mode, beat yourself.
Yes.
Yes.
I beat myself every night.
I didn't miss
Pull it
one.
up and put it in your long-term memory.
Are you sure?
You know it's bad.
This doesn't help me learn. I just do this to be competitive.
Alright, you guys
You
ready?
just don't.
Yeah.
Because they're ghosts and then, yeah. Someone needs to get signed in. There you go.
Gosh darn it.
We're gonna go fast.
I hate fast.
Oh, you're damn.
I accidentally almost did it.
How much?
That was fast.
Everyone's looking at
AJ, I'm right after you.
Sorry, I went to click and I accidentally
I'm after Poppy?
Duke is on the board twice. So you
23rd
know.
place.
Click faster than me last time.
Two guys.
That's awesome.
Oh, dude. Ooh. Do it.
Oh, yes.
No.
Just
Do it.
First place.
Which one? No, they both.
I'm in 22nd place.
Oh wait, what?
Oh, slow this time, man.
Oh,
Oh my goodness.
he ain't that. Where's the highest corner? He ain't that far either.
Oh, I almost clicked the wrong one.
You're a cheater, dude. He's got
touch
screen, bro. He got the touch screen. He's cheating over
I
here.
see that you have that touchscreen. That is cheating.
Yeah,
It is cheating, bro.
Boot him
But
out.
hop on our level. Hop on our level, bro. We still take.
I'll click.
Hey, does everyone that missed it know why they missed it?
Yeah, because it's switched.
Because they moved it in a different spot and you were trying to guess where
Yeah,
it was
but I
going to
got
be.
it right, so.
Alright.
I thought it was switch over to the other side of the room. So I was like, I'm about to click this fast. It was ghosts being
What? How do you still miss stuff?
Remember, the bipolar is talking about water being like those magnets. Think about magnets sometimes like each other, other times they don't.
13 points behind AJ.
AJ, you're not even close.
Yeah, AJ's back at 9.
You ordered ghosts.
And he was like, move your big old head, Michael.
Ooh, okay, I'm not gonna be sure. I didn't click the wrong one. Okay. Definitely passed. Yeah.
Master Egger.
Way.
I'm right behind myself. I'm 13 points. I'm right behind you. 2 points behind you. Well, I'm tied with you.
No, tell me why we like less than 15 points apart.
Don't call me that.
Yeah.
Oh, no.
That was the easiest one.
You said what?
I'm coming for you, Egger.
Oh, wait, no.
Haircut took 2 hours.
Yeah, they had to switch.
212 degrees.
Yeah, you on. Y'all have to deal with it, man. We got 2 touch screens.
Yeah. Where? What, like what part of your hair?
Coming at you. Look out.
What?
No, I'm answering. You got touch screen too. I got you. I wasn't paying attention.
Oh, man. Told you.
That's why he's in second right now. Jesse, ain't no way he up there. But look, I won first. So
It's all mad.
Oh, the first one.
Dang it.
Okay.
People still get
AJ,
points
get a
slow. I still
question
get
wrong.
what?
Please.
I didn't even pay attention.
Let's go draw on the board for me what a surface irrigation system looks like.
Jesse does.
I can't draw him.
Go draw it, Jesse.
I can describe it for you.
Jesse,
Draw it.
Draw
go
it.
draw
I
it.
like
Go
it.
draw it.
No,
Oh,
go
Jesse.
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 Oh, yeah. Everyone take his chair.
Michael.
Oh yeah, I'm thinking.
Alright, guys, let's watch it. Talk us through it. Let's give them our attention, guys.
I told you I'd get your chair.
I am so not gonna say one.
Draw it.
Okay, draw it again.
The surface irrigation system.
It is.
The ones the Egyptians used.
Wait.
It's like a big canal.
Draw like a river and then a bunch of little canals. Put some squiggly lines.
So that's a river. What do we do off of the river?
Then you gotta draw your canal. Then you gotta draw your field.
Now he's actually gonna mean a lot.
Then you gotta draw your crops. These are the little canals.
It's close enough.
Alright, Jesse, that's good. So just remember, it's taking the water from another source of water and running it out into our
It's gonna
fields.
be fun.
Alright, everyone ready? I guess.
Little fat head.
It's too late.
Bro, I might have like
It's
lost
too late.
might have lost
I should have quicker than that time. Okay.
Underground subsurface. Wolfing on a master acre.
No, we're not whooping them. I'm trying.
You ready?
I wish I had a
You ready?
Dude, I don't know.
What are you waiting on?
I can't see it. Might be a big old bull pit. It's not bull pit. I'm funny. Damn, we're in third place now.
You are down.
Bro, what is? You're still giving back too?
Who's Hoppy?
Bro, my nose is back.
Right there.
No, he's there.
Alright, last question. Y'all ready?
He said no.
Yo, dude. Get beat.
I know.
Get beat.
Anchor text over here.
Give me a second at least.
Oh, I can.
What the f? 5 points behind.
5 points.
Who's Duca?
Who do you think it is?
You guys know.
He's leaving.
I was 5 points behind.
So bad.
No, we got someone to.
No.
Edgar, I beat you.
Bro, you got touchscreen.
No, you definitely did not. Oh, wait, yeah.
So there's one last thing I want to talk to you guys about. Actually, while we're at it, while I walk around talking, I'll collect your papers.
Oh shoot, I'm doing my bad.
I'm gonna have her
Let me put my name on this.
collect. Yeah, make sure her names are on it. She's gonna collect these for our participation points, and then she'll give them back for you guys to have.
Man, she'll probably grade them.
She wouldn't even give us a.
That's it.
She'd get all pissed.
Wait, so wait, what's the other thing I gotta do?
Fucking for him.
Bart,
She'll get all pissed off.
Damn, wait. I don't think
Mine's changing.
No, she'll get pissed off because she gave us.
Mine changed all over the top. Look at it, it's all red.
Because you dumped water.
Yeah, you already told me that you don't
Bitch,
water
golden
over.
boy.
I think God. I didn't. Damn, it's not fast.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Alright, hey, everyone take a seat. Take a seat. Except for you, because you're collecting color pencils. So, what happens when plants do not get water?
They dry up and die.
What's that called?
Called starvation of water. I don't know.
Star something? Starts with a W.
Wilty.
Oh.
Wilting. Right?
Isn't that from Star Trek? I thought that was like.
No.
He said it. He said it. I just took it from him.
Oh, he stole it from you? Good. So it's important that we see these Wiltons back here.
Oh my god, that's a gang
So, take a look at the end of these leaves. Now, can you bring them back?
You can try.
You can try.
I don't know that. Some of that, like you get dead, like that little brown one right there.
What do you do with it when it's dead?
Cut it off.
Cut it off. Why do you cut it off?
Because it can kill the rest of the plant.
What happens? So, all of you baby-faced boys in here, hey, what happens whenever, except for Edgar, what happens when you shave for the first time?
Feels weird. That was like
It grows back fast.
It grows before. So, by doing this, we are. What? We are promoting new growth. That's the idea behind that. What do you do?
we do a t-shirt.
You missed that? What?
I'm freshen up real quick.
Mark.
I've been shaved in 2 days. I'd say day. Actually, yeah, day. I shaved a lot. I haven't shaved on that. It's been a week.
Yeah.
It's been a day for me.
I don't know.